AITA, my ex stole my daughter's flute money. My name is Joanna, I'm 31, and my daughter, Cielo, just turned 12. Cielo has always had music inside her. The way her fingers tap on counters, the way she hums while walking down the street, the way she drifts off into rhythms no one else seems to notice. Lately, she's been talking nonstop about joining the school orchestra to play the flute. Her eyes light up when she talks about it. I see the excitement in her, the hope that maybe she can finally fit in somewhere. She's always been a little bigger than her classmates, and she's faced teasing and bullying more than I care to remember. I can see that music might be her refuge, the one place where she can belong without judgment. But money is always the problem. Renting the flute for the year costs $180, and the uniform adds another $60. My budget is so tight that sometimes I skip meals or small necessities just to make sure we have enough for groceries. Living paycheck to paycheck is exhausting. I've done it for years, and somehow I managed, but this felt impossible. I didn't know how I could scrape together the extra money, and I found myself quietly praying, something I rarely do, hoping for some small miracle. Then a miracle came in the form of an unexpected bonus at work for picking up extra weekend shifts. I jumped at every opportunity, working longer days, arriving early, leaving late, all to save enough for Cielo. At the end of a long, exhausting week, I counted the money and realized I had just enough for the flute and the uniform. Relief washed over me so completely it felt like I could finally breathe. I had done it. My little girl would have her dream. But then came the nightmare. Carlo, my ex-partner, the man I had separated from 5 years ago, has always struggled with compulsive habits, gambling, debts, reckless decisions. I knew him well enough to know he would take when he felt he needed it, and I had no reason to trust that he wouldn't. I had kept the money in a small envelope on my dresser, right next to Cielo's school note, ready to hand it in. This morning, the envelope was gone. My debit card, too, missing from my wallet. All but $5 of my account drained. My stomach dropped, my chest went cold, and I felt a wave of panic so sharp I couldn't breathe. The $240 that had been my careful work, my sacrifices, the thing I had saved just for Cielo, gone. I felt frozen. There was no one I could call, no family nearby, no friend who could lend me enough in time. I have been independent since I was 18. I've always taken care of myself and my daughter, and now I had nothing. I had no way to fix this before school started. I felt like a failure, like a parent who had let her child down in the one thing that mattered most right now. As we walked to school, Cielo chattered about the flute colors she liked, the songs she wanted to learn, the scales she was going to practice. Every word, every excited little jump of her foot reminded me of the envelope that wasn't there, of the uniform pieces I couldn't buy, of the wide smile I should have seen when she handed in the form. My throat tightened, my chest hurt. How could I tell her? How could I crush her hope before the day had even begun? We reached the school, and I took a deep breath. Cielo, I don't have the money for your flute right now, I said, my voice trembling. Her face fell, pale, her hands twisting nervously. What do you mean? She whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. I don't have it. Something happened at home, I said, trying to keep it simple, hoping it wouldn't hurt her too badly. Her eyes welled up immediately. She didn't yell. She didn't cry at first. She just looked down at her sneakers and whispered, so, I can't join. I knelt down to her level and took her hands in mine. I don't want to disappoint you. I promise we'll figure this out. Maybe there's another way. Maybe a local rental. Maybe a payment plan. We won't give up, Cielo. I promise. Her lip trembled, but I really wanted this. I've been waiting for so long. I hugged her tightly, feeling her small frame shake under the weight of disappointment, a weight I couldn't lift right away. I wanted to cry too, but I swallowed the tears. I wanted to be her strength. After school, we spent hours searching for solutions. I called local music shops, explaining my situation. I emailed small foundations, hoping for grants or aid. I asked Cielo's music teacher if the school had any assistance programs. Each call, each email, ended in polite but firm rejections. Nothing came through fast enough for the deadline. My chest tightened with every no. My stomach knotted, my hope draining slowly, painfully. That evening, Cielo curled up on the couch with her old keyboard. She didn't speak much, just played softly, creating the music she couldn't yet have in the orchestra. I watched her, my heart heavy, feeling helpless but also inspired. She was still making music even when the path was blocked. I promised myself I would find a way, even if it took weeks or months. I could not let her dream slip away because of someone else's recklessness. The next morning, I decided to confront Carlo. I called the old number I had for him. It went straight to voicemail. I left a calm message, trying not to sound panicked, trying not to make him defensive. Carlo, the money you took was for Cielo's school. I need it back today. I waited hours. No response. My stomach twisted with anger and despair. How could someone take what you worked for, what was meant for your child, and leave you nothing? That evening, I found Cielo practicing scales in her room. I tried to keep my frustration contained, but when I told her about the failed calls and the missing money again, her eyes filled with tears. Mom, I don't want to fail before I even start, she said softly, her voice breaking. I hugged her again, feeling the hopelessness and determination clash inside me. I promised her again that I wouldn't stop trying. Over the next several days, we scoured every corner of the apartment. I even looked in the neighbors' lost and found areas, double-checked everywhere, hoping somehow the envelope had been misplaced. Each time, I came up empty-handed. I had arguments with myself, whispered curses at the ceiling, cried silently in the shower. I felt trapped by someone else's actions. Every evening, Cielo played her old keyboard, sometimes humming the melodies she wanted to learn on the flute, and each note reminded me how much I had to fight to make her happy. I tried to stay calm, but the tension built. One night, Carlo called from an unknown number. I answered, my hands shaking. Joanna, he said, voice casual, I needed that money. It's gone. Don't bother looking for it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone, but I swallowed the rage. Carlo, I said, my voice tight but steady. That was for Cielo. You've taken something that was meant for her. I will find a way to replace it. But this isn't something you can just dismiss. He laughed softly and hung up. I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted and angry. I looked at Cielo, who had fallen asleep on the floor beside her keyboard, still clutching her music sheets. I stroked her hair, whispering that I would fix it, that I would find a way, that I would make sure she still got her chance. My tears fell quietly beside her peaceful, sleeping face. The following day, I called every music shop within a 50-mile radius. I combed online forums for used flutes, for loans, for rentals. I asked every friend I could think of, sent messages on social media to local communities, and even asked teachers in other schools if they knew of anything available. Each rejection stung, but I refused to stop. Cielo's dream mattered more than my pride, more than exhaustion, more than the heartbreak of someone else's carelessness. By the evening, Cielo was crying softly in her room, frustrated. Mom, why does it have to be so hard? Why can't it just happen? I held her again. Because sometimes the world doesn't make things easy, I said softly. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. We will make this happen, Cielo. I promise. I stayed with her, brainstorming new ideas, making lists of foundations, rental programs, and secondhand instruments. I whispered reassurances into her hair, swore that even if it took months, I wouldn't let her dream die. The week after the money disappeared felt endless, like we were trapped in a storm with no shelter. Every day blurred into the next. I spent hours calling music shops, explaining my situation, hoping someone might have a used flute or know a family willing to help. I scoured Facebook groups, community forums, even local buy and sell pages. Every no or sorry, nothing available, felt like a knife twisting deeper. At night, I'd lie in bed next to Cielo, listening to her soft keyboard playing, feeling a mixture of admiration and guilt. She was making music despite the roadblocks I couldn't remove. One morning, my phone buzzed. The message preview made me hesitate, an unknown number, but the words were enough to make my heart leap. Hi, I heard you're looking for a flute for your daughter. I have a gently used one I'm willing to lend for a few weeks. No cost. Jakai. I stared at the screen for a moment, almost refusing to believe it. I typed back instantly, trying not to let my desperation show, arranging to pick it up that afternoon. When I arrived at Jakai's small apartment, the air was warm with the scent of coffee and old books. He handed me the flute carefully, as though it were fragile beyond its physical form. It's not perfect, he said quietly, but it works. Just take care of it. I thanked him profusely, clutching the flute to my chest like it was a lifeline. When I brought it home, Cielo's eyes widened in wonder. The flute was small, a little scratched, but perfectly playable. She hugged it to herself, tears spilling down her cheeks. Mom, you did it, she whispered. I sat on the couch, holding her hands, and watched her swing between relief and disbelief. I felt my own chest loosen, a little, though exhaustion and tension still lingered. Relief, yes, for now. She could start. Sadness, too. It shouldn't have taken a week of worry, stress, and desperation for her to get what should have been hers from the start. But the relief was fragile. That night, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I swallowed hard and opened it. I took the money. I needed it. Don't ask for it back. Carlo, my hands shook. Anger, frustration, and helplessness mixed with a low, simmering panic. I wanted to call him, scream, demand the money back, but I refused. I couldn't let his recklessness dictate Cielo's happiness. Not tonight. I locked the phone and placed it face down on the counter, ignoring it. Cielo spent the evening exploring her borrowed flute. She made mistakes, laughed, and hummed through the notes, filling the apartment with sound. Watching her, I felt felt hope and dread at the same time. Hope because she could finally play, dread because I knew this was temporary. What if Jakai needed it back before we could figure something out? What if Carlo caused more trouble? The next morning, tension came home with me in the form of reality. While Cielo was at school, I logged into my bank account. I had barely slept, and the remaining $5 in my account mocked me. Rent was due soon. Groceries were running low. I realized the borrowed flute was only a stopgap. I still had to find a permanent solution before the school deadline. I called another local music store, speaking to a young clerk who sounded sympathetic but cautious. "We have a couple of flutes in the back," he said finally, "but the deposits are high, and we usually only rent long-term to families who can prove financial stability." I nodded silently, feeling like I'd just hit a wall I couldn't climb. By the time Cielo came home that afternoon, I had a headache from hours of phone calls and research. She burst in with her backpack, flopped onto the couch, and started practicing. Her focus, her joy, reminded me why I couldn't give up. I poured another cup of coffee and joined her, tapping out rhythms on the arm of the couch. Then the first real argument since the incident came. Cielo looked at me, frustrated, eyes glistening with tears. "Mom, why does everything have to be so hard? Why can't I just start playing?" I felt a flare of anger, but I swallowed it. "Because sometimes the world isn't fair, Cielo. People make mistakes, and we have to work harder to fix them. But we will. I promise." "I'm tired of promises," she shouted, throwing her hands in the air. "I just wanted to play like everyone else. Why can't I?" Her words stung, but I held her. "I know, baby. I know. I wish it were easier. I wish I could make it right instantly." The tension lingered through the week. Each morning, I feared receiving another message from Carlo. Each afternoon, I worried Jakai might change his mind. Each evening, I worried the school would close the registration before I found a permanent flute. But still, Cielo practiced, humming, laughing, and occasionally showing flashes of her own stubborn joy. By the weekend, I managed to convince a local music teacher, Mrs. Lang, to let Cielo borrow a school-owned practice flute until we could find a permanent one. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't hers, but it allowed her to join orchestra practice. When I told her, she threw her arms around me, half smiling, half sobbing. "Mom, I really—" "Yes, baby," I whispered. "We're making it work. You're playing this week, even if the flute isn't yours yet." That night, I sent a quick thank you message to Jakai. He replied almost immediately. "She sounds like she belongs on stage. Keep encouraging her. Don't worry about the flute." I felt a flicker of relief. For now, we had a path. It was temporary, fragile, but it existed. Still, I knew the battle wasn't over. Carlo could cause more problems. We were living on the edge financially. The borrowed instruments could be recalled. But for the first time in a week, I allowed myself a moment of peace. Cielo's dream was alive, her music filling our home, her laughter threading through the tension. I hugged her as she drifted off to sleep that night, flute resting beside her keyboard. The end. "Joanna, honestly, you are not the AITA. What you did was nothing short of remarkable. You faced an impossible situation, someone else taking money you painstakingly saved for your daughter. And instead of losing your cool or blaming her, you stayed focused, resourceful, and loving. That takes patience and grit most people can only talk about, but rarely practice." Cielo's excitement and persistence are proof that your efforts matter more than the money itself. She sees your dedication, your problem solving, and your refusal to give up. That's a bigger gift than any instrument. You didn't let the obstacle define her path. You found a way around it, even if it meant borrowing a flute or navigating uncertainty. That's parenting at its most grounded, realistic, and inspiring level. Carlo's behavior? Yeah, it's absurd, but your calm, steady approach is the opposite of absurd. You didn't let anger control the narrative. You didn't lash out in panic. You calmly explored options, reached out to anyone who could help, and focused on solutions instead of dwelling on the theft. That's how adults handle chaos without turning it into trauma for a kid, which is exactly what you did. Here's a gentle insight. Life doesn't always hand out what you earn or deserve neatly. Sometimes, the universe throws in extra challenges. But how you respond is what defines the story. You didn't give up. You created a path, even if it wasn't perfect or immediate. That's a lesson Cielo will carry forever. Resilience, patience, and trust in your own ability to make things right. If we want to throw in a little joke for perspective, Carlo probably thinks budgeting means hiding all the envelopes in one place and hoping someone else trips over them. Meanwhile, you turned heartbreak into problem solving, and that's way cooler than any plan he could dream up. Verdict calmly stated, not the AITA. You showed dedication, love, and ingenuity. You turned a stressful situation into an opportunity for creativity and growth. You made your daughter's dream happen, even under pressure, and that's what counts. Before we jump into the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know your favorite part in the comments. AITA for feeling nervous about sharing my pregnancy with my sister? My name is Matilda, I'm 27, and my sister, Mary, is 29. Growing up, Mary has always been the storm in the family, loud, emotional, and dramatic in ways that left me holding everything together. I learned early that my own feelings often had to wait while I managed hers. If Dana, our mother, wasn't around to calm things down, I became the buffer, the stabilizer, the one keeping the household from spinning out. I would quietly absorb her tantrums, her tears, her moments of despair, stuffing my own emotions deep inside because there simply wasn't room for them. Over the years, I've become practiced at setting aside my own emotions, though it hasn't always been healthy. It feels like I've spent most of my life with my voice muted, like my own life is a whisper that only gets heard in brief, fractured moments. Mary got married 2 years ago, and I married about 13 months ago. The week of my wedding coincided with her first IVF cycle. Dana insisted I keep Mary busy, make sure she wasn't dwelling on the procedure, and subtly adjust my wedding plans around her needs. I did it quietly, nodding and smiling, even as irritation simmered beneath the surface. I spent my rehearsal dinner managing Mary's anxiety, sitting by her, listening to her complaints about the injections, the medications, the appointments. I smiled for the wedding photos while she whispered tearful fears into my ear, and I nodded, agreeing, comforting, silently sacrificing every bit of energy I had for her. No one noticed. It wasn't about me. It never has been. Mary has struggled with fertility for years due to PCOS. Her cycles, her doctor's appointments, her hormonal fluctuations, everything about her journey is charged, intense, and, in a way, consuming. Her IVF cycles are the center of attention whenever they happen, and any other news, good or bad, is filtered through her story. It's like living in a constant shadow. The success of anyone else, the pain of anyone else, barely registers, because it always bends around her orbit. For the past year, my husband, Jakai, and I have been trying to conceive. We've had 2 early miscarriages, both times leaving me alone with a grief so sharp it physically hurt because I couldn't tell anyone. Not Dana, not Mary. I was too scared that my pain would be dismissed or compared, that someone would whisper, "It's not as bad as hers." So I carried it in silence. My nights spent crying quietly in the bathroom, clutching a pillow to my chest, trying not to wake Jakai, trying not to let the grief show in a world that seems determined to overlook it. I felt isolated, invisible, and yet responsible for keeping everything around me emotionally stable. Recently, I ran into an old friend, Lena, who confided her struggles with endometriosis and IVF. I told Dana about it, expecting a small gesture of understanding, maybe some acknowledgement that other women are struggling too. Instead, Dana leaned back and whispered, "Don't tell Mary. She'll be upset. It could trigger her." I nodded silently, my throat tight, and a familiar frustration churned inside me. Of course, once again, my life, my experiences, my empathy had to bend around hers. My pain, my joy, my victories, my small victories, always secondary. Even the smallest conversations with Mary highlight this tension. One afternoon, we were having coffee with Dana, chatting casually, when I mentioned her friend Penny. Penny had been struggling with fertility for years, but recently had a positive IVF result. I expected happiness to be shared, to be celebrated. Instead, Mary froze, her eyes narrowing, a sharp edge creeping into her voice. "I don't want to talk about it." I tried to soften it, saying gently, "Penny's really had a long journey, but it worked out for her." Mary snapped, "Well, it's unfair." I swallowed, trying to reason, to soothe, to bridge a gap that seemed unbridgeable. Celebrating someone else's happiness doesn't erase your struggles. Their success doesn't mean yours is any less important. "I've had a long journey," she screamed, and suddenly it wasn't about Penny. It wasn't about the facts. It was about her fear, her pain, her perception of the world as being against her. I was stunned, dumbfounded, and exhausted. No matter what I said, no matter how gently I phrased it, the walls were too high, the storm too powerful. I walked away with my own feelings heavy in my chest, feeling invisible, invalidated, and powerless. And now I've just found out I'm pregnant. I should feel joy, relief, maybe even pride. Instead, I feel apprehension, anxiety, and a gnawing sadness I can't shake. I lie awake at night, my mind racing. When do I tell Mary? How do I tell Dana? Will anyone ever be able to celebrate this with me? Or will it all come filtered through Mary's struggles? I imagine Mary's voice, sharp, defensive, accusatory. It's not fair. And Dana, worried, tense, always calculating, trying to hold us both together, but inevitably tilting toward Mary, because she's always tilted toward Mary. I feel trapped. Every moment of happiness I have is tainted by anticipation of grief, jealousy, anger, and comparison. I want to shout to the world that this is my life too, that I deserve happiness, that my grief, my journey, my loss, my tiny victories matter. But I know better. I have learned the hard way that any loud claim of joy is met with scrutiny and guilt. Jakai tries to reassure me, holding my hands. reassurance, telling me everything will be okay. But even he doesn't fully understand the weight of decades of being the quiet one, the one who holds everything together while your sister rages and your mother tiptoes around the fallout. Even he doesn't know the layers of anxiety, the nights spent crying in secret, the tight knot in my chest that comes from knowing my life's milestones will always be seen in comparison to Mary's struggles. The other day, Mary came into my office, cheerful but wary, and said, "You've been quiet lately. Something's going on, isn't it?" Her eyes searched mine, suspicious, probing. I froze. How could I tell her without setting off an explosion? How could I let her know this miracle has happened while knowing it will feel like betrayal to her? I wanted to scream. I'm scared. I'm happy. I'm terrified. I'm desperate. And I just want someone to be happy for me. But I swallowed it. I nodded, smiled weakly, and said nothing. Each morning, I wake with a mixture of excitement and dread. Every kick, every flutter, is a reminder that life is moving forward, that my body is doing something amazing, something I have longed for, but I am burdened by the knowledge that the people I love most might not see it the same way. I watch Mary scroll through her phone, oblivious, and I feel a pang of resentment that I can't voice. She's struggling, yes, but that doesn't erase my life, my hope, my small miracle. And yet, I remain silent. Even Dana has started noticing my distance, the hesitation in my voice, the way I flinch when Mary's mood spike. She asks, softly, "Matilda, are you okay? You've been quiet." I nod, and the lie slips easily. I'm fine. Inside, I feel a storm, a collision of fear, grief, guilt, joy, and anticipation. I know I can't keep it bottled forever. Soon, I will have to speak, to reveal the secret that changes everything, and I am terrified of what will happen when I do. 2 weeks had passed since I found out I was pregnant, and the tension at home had been unbearable in ways I hadn't anticipated. Every morning, I woke with a flutter of excitement in my chest, immediately dampened by a cold wave of anxiety. Should I tell Mary today? Should I wait? What if I waited too long and she found out accidentally? Or worse, what if the news broke the fragile equilibrium we'd held for years? Each day, I wrestled with the same storm of emotions: joy, fear, guilt, and the shadow of resentment that Mary's struggles always cast over everything in our family. Jakai tried to reassure me, but he couldn't understand the decades of being the quiet one, the emotional buffer, the invisible sister. One evening, after a tense dinner where every bite of food felt heavy and every glance from Mary seemed calculated, she sat down beside me on the couch. Her expression was calm, but there was a careful watchfulness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. She said softly, almost hesitantly, "Matilda, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, my stomach tightening. My pulse sped up as a mix of hope and fear coursed through me. I saw your medical app notification," she said, her voice low, careful, wary. Are you pregnant?" I felt my throat constrict, my hands trembling in my lap. The question hung in the air, heavy, inevitable. "Yes," I whispered, my voice barely audible, though I could feel the weight of it pressing against my chest. Mary froze. Her face went pale, and her hands clutched the edge of the couch. There was a long, heavy silence, the kind that stretches seconds into what feels like hours. Her lips trembled, and finally, she whispered, This isn't fair. I'm still in the middle of trying, Matilda. It's like life is giving it to you so easily." I wanted to reach across the space between us, to pull her close and reassure her, but the words caught in my throat. Finally, I said softly, "I know. I'm so sorry, Mary. I didn't mean for it to feel like this. I wanted to share my news with love, not pain. I don't want this to hurt you." And then she broke. She leaned back, head falling against the couch, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It does hurt," she sobbed. "Everyone's always celebrating me, and now it's all about you. How can you just have this?" Her voice cracked, her body trembling. I felt my own tears spill, but I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. I took a deep breath and said, "I understand, Mary. Truly. But this baby, this is part of my life. It's not a competition. We both have our journeys, and they're both valid. I need you to know that." The conversation devolved, spiraling into a torrent of raw emotion. Mary accused me of being selfish, of not understanding the pain she'd been through. I defended myself, trying to explain that I had also suffered, that my grief over our miscarriages had been real and deep, even if I hadn't shared it. We argued for hours, voices rising, tears flowing, sometimes lapsing into silence, heavy and oppressive. I hated seeing her hurt, but I also hated how my own happiness felt forbidden, constrained by decades of emotional hierarchy in our family. Later that night, as I sat on the edge of the bed, Jakai came in, his hand on my shoulder. "Matilda, maybe you should give her space," he said gently. I nodded, knowing he was right, but the thought of holding this secret for even a few more days felt unbearable. I had wanted to celebrate this life, to feel unburdened joy, but the emotional weight of of Mary's struggle hovered over me like a storm cloud I couldn't escape. The following week, the Real challenge arrived. Dana called, full of excitement and curiosity. "Matilda, I just heard. Congratulations. How's Mary taking it?" Before I could answer, Mary's voice, sharp and wounded, cut in. "I'm not happy about it yet." "Why does she get to be happy? I've been struggling for so long." I froze, my chest tightening. I could almost hear Dana's mental calculations, the careful weighing of feelings, the attempt to maintain balance in a household where emotions are always in tension. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Dana, please. This is our conversation. We need to work through this as a family, without judgment. Mary is allowed to be upset. I'm allowed to be happy. We can hold both truths." Silence. Then, Dana sighed, softly, reluctantly. I suppose that's true." The emotional turbulence didn't end. Every day was a dance of negotiation. Mary fluctuated between excitement and resentment, curiosity and bitterness. She asked endless questions about the pregnancy, the first ultrasound, the doctor's advice, my energy levels, the baby's heartbeat. But she also subtly, quietly expressed jealousy, comparing herself to me, measuring my success against her struggles. There were moments of explosive tension, too. One afternoon, she accused me of flaunting my pregnancy, saying I was trying to make her feel bad. I nearly shouted back, frustrated, exhausted, but I forced myself to step back and breathe. I had learned to hold the line, to listen even when it hurt. I reminded her, gently but firmly, that this wasn't a competition, that her feelings were valid, but my happiness was valid too. The end. "Matilda, let's pause for a second and breathe. Reading your story, it's clear you've been carrying a lot for a long time. Grief, frustration, and the quiet exhaustion of always being the one who absorbs everyone else's storms. That weight doesn't just vanish when good news shows up. It lingers, making joy feel complicated, almost dangerous, like celebrating might somehow betray your sister or mother. But here's the thing. Your life and your happiness are yours. They aren't negotiable, even when family dynamics are messy. Mary's struggle with infertility and her emotional intensity doesn't erase the hardships you've endured or the losses you faced. Those miscarriages were your grief too, real and profound. Feeling conflicted about sharing your pregnancy doesn't make you selfish, it makes you human. The chill perspective here is to recognize that emotions are not zero-sum. You can carry excitement, fear, and love all at once. And yes, Mary can carry her disappointment, jealousy, or frustration without either of you being wrong. One practical approach is pacing. You don't have to announce your pregnancy like a fireworks show. Small steps, like confiding privately to Dana or a supportive friend first, can help you feel anchored before facing Mary's reactions. Visualize it like music. The melody of your joy can exist alongside the dissonance of her frustration. You're not silencing her, just choosing the tempo for your own expression. A personal insight: letting go of guilt is key. You've spent years being the silent stabilizer, the emotional buffer. That's admirable, but it doesn't obligate you to suppress your happiness forever. Boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges that let you enjoy life without collapsing under the weight of others' expectations. Consider small rituals, journaling, meditative moments, or even celebrating privately with Jakai before family acknowledgement. These let your joy grow roots before it's shared. And a bit of joke for the vibe. Think of family dynamics like a long, winding hiking trail. Some parts are muddy and steep, others are sunny and calm. You can't control where the rocks are, but you can choose your boots, your pace, and which scenery you pause to enjoy. Walking through doesn't make the trail unfair. It just means you're moving forward. Chill verdict, fully stated, not the AITA. You've survived, you've grieved, and now you've earned a moment of happiness. Navigating Mary's reactions with patience and self-awareness isn't selfish. It's a conscious choice to honor both your own life and the emotional landscape around you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out AITA for saying enough to my girlfriend's mom controlling our life. Click here to watch it now.